Hello and welcome my friends to my YouTube channel, philippospan. Weekly tips and tricks on how to work with Microsoft Office applications. Today's video will be about Microsoft Outlook.
How to view your inbox the way that you want in Microsoft Outlook. In Microsoft Outlook, we are allowed to customize the view of our inbox and calendar among other Outlook folders. We can change the view of items, fonts, and many other settings. The change that is mostly made is to change the font size in the message list or in the reading pane. Once we change the view and save it, we can then select the name of any of the views created and apply it. We must select the View tab and then from the left to locate the area named Current Views. Once located, we select the Change View command. Where once selected, the drop-down menu appears where we select the command Manage Views. Once the Manage Views command is selected, the Manage All Views dialog box appears. In this dialog box, we have the Views for folder inbox, the one that is activated at the moment. Then we have the current view settings and where it can be used and which is the view type. The compact view and where it can be used on and which is the view type. The single view and where it can be used on and which is the view type. The preview view and where it can be used on and which is the view type. For each view name that we select from the Manage All Views dialog box, at the bottom we have a description of the selected view. We can see the filter, how it is grouped by, how it is sorted, and if the filter is on or off. If we want to create a new view, we must select the New button located at the right area of the Manage All Views dialog box. Once the New command is selected, the Create a New View dialog box appears. In this dialog box, we first type in a name of the new view. From the middle of the dialog box, we can select a predefined type of view. We can select from Table, Timeline, Card, Business Card, People, Day, Week, Day/week/month, Icon, and etc. Then we can define where this view can be used on. We can select from this folder, visible to everyone, this folder, visible only to me, all mail and post folders. Whatever adjustments we make, we must press the OK button for them to take place. We can also copy a view that we have created or a pre-existing one by selecting the Copy button located at the right of the Manage All Views dialog box. Once selected, the Copy View dialog box appears where we must type in the name of the new view and then we can define where this view can be used on. We can select from this folder, visible to everyone, this folder, visible only to me, all mail and post folders. Whatever adjustments we make, we must press the OK button for them to take place. We can also modify a view that we have created or a pre-existing one. We just select the view that we want, and from the right of the Manage All View dialog box, we select the Modify button. Once we select the Modify command, the Advanced View Settings dialog box appears, where we can select the following. Columns. We can add, remove, rearrange column fields from the selected view. Group by. We can define how the items will be grouped by. Some options available are Created, Do Not Auto-Archive, Due Date, Flag Status, Follow-Up Flagged, From, and etc. Sort, we can define how we want items to be sorted. We can apply 4 different sort criteria, either ascending or descending or a combination of both, by filling in all the appropriate fields. Some settings are received representing name, recipient name, RSS feed, sensitivity, sent, and many more. Other settings, we can define the display of the column headings and rows. We can change the column and row font. We can change how the grid lines and group headings will be displayed. We can define the message preview by changing the font and its size. We can also define the position of the reading pane, either at right, bottom, or off. Conditional formatting. We can define rules for the current view. Format columns. We can format all the available columns. And reset current view, where once used the view will be restored to its original state. Once finished, for the adjustments to take place, we must press the OK button at any open dialog box.
Thank you all for watching. If you have enjoyed what you saw in this video, please subscribe to my channel. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free and let me know by heading down to the comment section.